All right, all right, all right. Thank you for your patience, everybody. I already see folks have been tuning in, waiting patiently. We are here, 8 o'clock, tuned in, and we're live. I'm Rasen Gola Farai.
And I'm Jenna, and welcome to
People Talking Kali. Folks, good to see you once again. People Talking Kali is a non-political platform where we can talk about Pakiti Tirshi Kali and the passion that we have without any of the other stuff getting in the way. And so we welcome all PTK practitioners and all warriors to join in this conversation. And what makes this show unique, we believe, is that you, the viewer, have an opportunity to participate. Tonight we have a great guest. Every guest is a special guest. For Jenna and I, this is a very, very special guest because as we were growing in our group, we were able to train with Tuhon Leslie pretty much yearly when he would come out to New York. And that training was a huge influence on our program. There were times where he would be, you know, on the breaks, I'm picking this man's brain when he's trying to just enjoy his meal. And so, you know, without further ado, we have with us Tuhon Leslie Buck out of Austin, Texas, head of Tactical Arts Academy, Jagabaya of Silat, which we will talk more about, certified trainer in CrossFit, as well as an individual who has trained civilians, law enforcement, and military agencies worldwide. Tuhon Leslie, it's great to have you here, sir. How you feeling today?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it. I'm excited to get started.
Yes.
Let's get this party started,
Yes.
right?
Thank you so much for coming. Already we have a lot of people who are checking in just to give you their greetings. We have Mandala Lamont from
Hey.
the West Coast checking in, and from the East Coast we have the Elite family and Brother Ali Johnson, the Elite meaning the PTK from New York. And we have Brother Ali Johnson from Chicago. And we have a little upstate New York. We have our friends from Nomad Kali. We have Brother Morgan from Citadel Combat Arena. We have Guru Rolando from the McKinley's in Florida.
Sagasa now.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thank you all so much for checking in. And of course, please feel free to type in your questions. So Tuhon Leslie, you know, again, you know, when the first time we met you, it was actually a special day for us. We were actually celebrating our wedding anniversary. And we couldn't think of a better way to do it than to train Kali together. So it kind of just solidified our training and our marriage as well. But when we think about, you know, a comprehensive learning of PTK, we think about you. And so we really appreciate having you. So let's just start with the general check-in. How are you doing in Austin, Texas, amid all of this stuff that's going on?
I've been holding up well. My family's been doing good. You know, we're same thing, shelter in place, but we, you know, we have a little more option to go out to the park and go to places where nobody else is around and you don't see anyone. So we were able to get a little more outdoors and hiking and stuff. So it's been good. Yeah, we're safe and healthy. So appreciate it. I hope y'all been doing well too.
Yeah, fortunately, you know, training is keeping us in shape.
Yeah.
And, you know, helping us regiment our time. You know, salute to Kali Doug for saluting in. The Elite family also wants to big up Reiko. You know, thank her for sharing you with us right now for this time. And Tuhon, you know, I'm always fascinated with when people knew that PTK was going to be their journey. You know, a lot of times we could talk about how we got started, which is what I would love for you to do. Yeah. But also, what was that moment when you kind of felt like, you know what, this is something I want to dedicate my time to?
Gotcha. Yeah, you know, I was a wrestler in high school, and that's what kind of got me, that's back in the 80s, and that kind of got me interested in the kind of martial arts world. But it was all about, it's all up to me. It doesn't matter what all the other guys do. I'm the one who win or loses, right? And so that kind of got me interested in the martial arts world. And a buddy of mine was like, you got to come check out the school I'm going to. And I was like, I don't want to wear the outfit, the karate uniform and all this stuff. I'm not into that. Well, he worked on me for a little while. And finally I went out there, and the instructor is an amazing man. His name is Stephen Fristow. He's a black man, but he's albino, and he's from Springfield, Illinois. And he grew up, you know, training martial arts from 4 years old. His parents realized, you know, he's not going to fit in. We need to start training him. And in Springfield, the white gang said, "You're not white," and the black gang said, "You're not black." So he fought them all. And
Wow.
as he went through life, he's 90% blind. And he is an incredible person, incredible martial artist. Yeah. So when I trained with him, he'd gone through like 5 or 6 years, the Inosanto Academy as an instructor. He traveled to Hawaii. He traveled to meet all these different masters, Silat, Kali, and done basement fights for money. And I mean, crazy stick sparring where it's a cup and a mouthpiece. That's all you have. But just an awesome guy. And so he got me really thinking about how to learning. He got me into martial arts. And so that hooked me because he's not only an amazing person, but just I fell in love with the Kali and Silat right away. And then it wasn't until I came to Texas in '93 that I focused on Pikiti Tertia. And that's when I met my instructor, Tuhon Erwin Ballarta. And Erwin is just not only just the most fun person you'll ever meet, super positive, great instructor, but so talented and so skilled that I really saw the next level of how Kali can be done. And so Pikiti Tertia is his specialty, of course. And that's when I realized, okay, this is the art I need to study. I'm not as worried about other styles. They're great too, but this is what I really want to go into. So Tuhon Erwin is the one who really directed me to focus on PTK.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, Tuhon Erwin Ballarta, we're going to be able to talk to him next month. And what was it like? What was Tuhon Erwin like, training with Tuhon Erwin? You know, if you could just give us, because a lot I think of the younger generation may not be as familiar with him.
Yes.
And he's not as public per se. And so maybe we could just honor him a moment, just tell us a little bit about training with him, what that was like.
Yeah, well, Erwin was, real close to Grandtuhon for many years, and they lived out in Big Springs together and trained on a daily basis for a while. And I guess it was the late 70s and 80s, early 80s, they trained together. And when he came out and started teaching, he just said, "I really just want to share my culture. I'm not, really interested in money or school or anything like this. I just a little bit of time to promote my culture." And so he created a family atmosphere right away where, hey, we go train, we get up early. Texas was hot all the time. So we get up about 7 a.m., 6 a.m., something like that on Saturday morning, go train. And then he started a tradition, hey, let's all go eat breakfast together and hang out, talk, and all that kind of stuff. And so training with him was right away, you felt like you were in a family, you're in a group, super positive. As an instructor, is his profession, teaching law enforcement. So he was just excellent at doing that, but keeping it fun. I will say the first maybe 3 years, all we did was footwork and striking. So it took a while for him to kind of open up, partly because he's in law enforcement, and start teaching more beyond that. He's kind of like, well, maybe these guys will go away if I keep just hammering with the basics. But yeah, we paid our dues with about an hour of footwork, about an hour of striking, and maybe a few minutes of a little technique at the end, until gradually he kind of opened up more and more.
We don't find that as much nowadays. What kept you interested for those 3 years? Did you feel like, I know there's something more beyond this, let me hang in there? Or was it just what you were getting alone was good enough?
Well, it actually, one of his mottos was back to basics. And it was his emphasis on to strengthen those basics that made me appreciate the simple repetition and refinement, because you could see it in him. You could see how, he could deliver an angle one like nobody else. And it's like, what's going on here? Why is this so much more powerful? Why is what he's doing so much better, even if I imitate the movement? And so he really helped me appreciate that, even though I knew there was a lot there, those fundamentals, those basics are worth spending that time on, and you can enjoy training that just as much as you can something advanced or complicated, because that's, as we all know, the fundamentals is what you have, or you can't go any higher. Yeah,
I definitely think there's such a beautiful quality to learning. Would some people would consider that like the hard way or like hard style, like maybe taking a little bit more time to get to the meat. But we do see as students, there's such an immediate clarity that we see when we see certain Tuhon striking, and it's like it's something as simple as an angle one, and we're like, oh my God, that was awesome. Yeah. How did you do it like that? And we learn very quickly from repetition, and no one is above the basics. So I think that's just a great way to have a good foundation. What do you think is a good way to build a foundation in students?
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, of course, we're famous for footwork, right? So we always warm up every session with some type of footwork, some type of striking. I think it is encouraging your students to understand the value of those fundamentals so that they'll really invest and engage in training those, not just in class, but outside of class. And sometimes as instructors, we want to make sure our students are, I don't want to say entertained, but we maintain some interest. And of course that's important, but I find a lot of times that students actually enjoy when you give them more feedback in depth about something basic than you would think. Right. And so it's just creating that culture and opening up and saying, I'm going to make you awesome at this. I'm on your side. I'm going to give you some feedback about this. And I find students will embrace that pretty quickly. Even if they've done all kinds of other martial arts, they know, okay, this is valuable if we spend that time working on that foundation. And it's not just repetition. It's something that you engage them to refine by your feedback, right? And you help them analyze it for themselves.
Yeah. So that foundation with Tuhon Erwin helped provide that foundation. And then eventually along the way, you met GT, the Grandtuhon?
Right. So, training with Erwin for many years, he would talk about, some old stories, and it was Master Gahe was how most people referred to Grandtuhon at that time. So he said, Master Gahe this, we did that. And he told us, he said, really, I just want to prepare you guys so you can go on and train with him, right? Get you guys ready to train with GT. And so in the late 90s, Erwin just had more commitments with family and work and said, I'm going to kind of pull back and I want you guys to keep going. And with his blessing and recommendations, me and my buddy Rene Rodriguez and some of the other guys from our group, we went to the Philippines to train with GT. And that was a camp in 98, a mastery camp in 98. That was yet another level, of course, from what we had trained. And that was, a very memorable event. My buddy Tuhon Jelinas was there. A lot of folks, Tuhon Loki, a lot of guys were there. We had an awesome time. Training was brutal. And it was kind of a reunion for some of the other guys. But meeting Grandtuhon for the first time gave me the in to then start training with him privately. So I kept coming back for more and more and more after that. But we basically flew to the Philippines to meet him before he was coming back to the States.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So if you're just tuning in, we are honored to be here with none other than Tuhon Leslie Buck out of Austin, Texas. We have a couple of people who have checked in as well to just send their love. And that is, of course, one of your students, Mandala Arvee. Also
all right.
In your group. And we also have brother Roberto Doce. And we also have Rob Pagan, who was one of our former guests. And cool. We also have James Young, who's saying hi to you. He can't wait to have class with you again. So thank you all for tuning in. I think Francis from the Elite Acts was my first seminar with you, Tuhon Leslie. It actually wasn't. It was with Tuhon Jared. And that was Father's Day. But my second ever seminar was your seminar.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was just as memorable. It was it was our anniversary, So we spent our holidays training PTK family. This is our way of life.
That's awesome.
So 1998, you met GT, and you started training with him privately in the Philippines now.
Yeah, so 98, we met GT, and it's a big group. It's Olongapo or Zambales Beach Resort over near where Subic Bay is where they had the event. There were about 40 guys out there. We had 10 days of training. And I think the first day we learned a 7-count combination and did thousands of reps. So maybe day one, we did nearly 10,000 repetitions of the striking combination strikes there. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that left a big impression on me, that event. And I was like, okay, I'd already been traveling to Indonesia a lot. And I said, now's my opportunity. I'm going to start traveling to the Philippines. And so, the following year, I flew out maybe twice to the Philippines, stayed about a month, 5 weeks, something like that, and just trained with GT. Same thing, about 10 hours a day, every day, for as much as I could take, basically. Yeah.
Wow.
So GT, I mean, you were begging for coffee or any breaks. He I guess he was in his mid 60s at that time, and it was a mix of like physical challenge, hazing, coordination, all wrapped up in drill sergeant type stuff, all wrapped up into one. So you had no choice but to learn, and it was phenomenal, right? I mean, he just built on what Erwin did, and that started our years of training after that. From that point.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
There's a concurrent theme here with Grandtuhon and Tuhon, and that is the repetition of fundamentals, the hours, the 10,000 repetitions and over and over. And earlier, Jenna had asked about building a strong foundation in your students. Now we find ourselves, folks are training maybe 3 times a week, an hour and a half, maybe an hour, So, just to kind of go back to what she had asked and maybe expound on it a little bit, given our current, it's just, not current right now, pandemic, but I guess that's part of it too. How do we reinforce this kind of repetition in our students when, before they get to that level where they're wanting to take flights to the Philippines themselves?
Right. Okay. Well, you build it into the culture of your classes and your programs, right? So every time you start a class, it doesn't matter what it is, but you have some fundamentals that pertain to what you're about to teach. And that's how it works. They know the structure of your class starts with that coordination. And, talking with GT for over many years, I always try to pick his brain about teaching as well. And he used to complain sometimes. He said, I can't teach until people are coordinated, or it's a waste of time. Even if I move forward, then they're going to fail and I have to go backwards. And that's going to break the confidence of the student. And it's painful for everybody. So his big thing about that is, look, you're here with me for a weekend or a week or month. I need to be able to teach you here and now. We can't waste time doing like a few reps here and a few reps there. Let's get it all done right away so we can move on. And so for him, it was usually break them down, get them smooth, and build them up with the right movement. And then you layer on the instruction after that, because they can do it. If you don't do that first, they can kind of do it, but it's not going to work. Or it's going to work now, but later when they try to move on, they're going to struggle and have to go back again and refine. So if you build it into the culture and maybe demonstrate the value of that coordination, that repetition, obviously you're the example to your students, right? So they see, wow, you put this time in that, and that's why you're so good, right? That's why both of you are so good, is because you put that dedication in. So sometimes the students just need to know that, right? That this is the culture, this is what works. I want you guys to have fun, but I want to make sure I'm teaching you in a way that's going to work for you. You're going to be able to apply this, not just be, what do they call it? Edutainment. You kind of educate and entertain it all at once, but not really much of either one. So yeah, that's really how it is, just the culture.
It's beautiful. I think there was, long story short, I was at a convention in Arizona at a conference, and then I'm at a dinner. There was a conversation, not going to name no names, but there was an instructor of another martial arts talking to an instructor of Tirji, and then the instructor of the other martial arts basically said, I want to do this program, but I can't get my students to do more than 15 minutes of footwork.
Yeah.
And then the other instructor pretty much was basically like, well, you have to determine the quality of your program. But the Kiti instructor was saying, basically, this is about keeping students. You may have to be comfortable losing students to get the quality on point and have a solid program. And then in the long run, you're going to recoup because of the quality students that you have. And if there's rush to just get to the cool stuff, It's just beautiful the way you just said it and the way, you know, GT spoke about it. I'm glad that we could hear that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's our responsibility as an instructor to teach people so they can do it. It's not to make money, of course. It's not to entertain them. Of course, all those things can happen, right? You know, money allows you to do things and not go to your other job, right? You want your students to have fun and enjoy it and be, you know, get together and say, hey, I love this. This is fun stuff. But you have to make sure what you're doing is sound. It has integrity. It's going to work. And, you know, you do your job well, then it's up to them to take it the rest of the way.
That's right. Do you cycle through material on a time frame, or do you wait until the student is ready, as they say?
Okay. So that's a good question, right? So you know, for regular classes, I have a program that goes in a loop for each level, right? And they can jump in that loop at any time because we start every class with the fundamentals they need for the material we're currently working on. And then they go through that loop of different material. And by the time they've absorbed it all, they can kind of test a little bit and make sure they're ready, make sure I did my job, they did their job, and they bump up to the next level. So yes, I have it, you know, over years and years. I teach the classes, I record what I teach, then I reflect on, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what I can improve. And eventually I figured out how many weeks it takes to get through each level and structured it that way. So I know in 5 weeks exactly what I'll be teaching, right? And there's room for me to improve it, to change a little bit. But I have, you know, a kind of an outline of this is the stuff I'm going to cover. These are the drills that help develop that, and maybe some notes of what I want to try, right? Guinea pig on the students. So yeah, you know, for that kind of ongoing class, absolutely. I have a plan for each level all the way up, right? And it's fluid, right? Because my students will say, wait a minute, when I went through that level, that's not what we learned. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to improve it, right? I'm learning what I can get, what I can put in there, or what's too soon, or what's you know, not enough, or what's too much. It's the way it is.
As a teacher, I just want to say I could relate. I'm geeking out because I mean, as a high school teacher, I'm saying, I mean, that's kind of like you have to plan that curriculum for the year and make those adjustments along the way.
Right.
Well, you know, I went through many years of just like, oh man, I'm in the mood to do this, and I show up to class and I teach everything I know about that, and everybody has fun, and I had a great time, and I think I'm awesome. And then after a few weeks, people can't remember what the heck we're doing, right? It's because I've just taught based on my mood. And I learned that doesn't work in the long run. You know, I can kind of teach maybe a short session if that's only one time, but for a full-on program, I have to organize. I have to have lesson plans. I have to have repetition. I have to make sure there's review after a certain period of time, or information, you know, it dwindles away from their minds and their practice. So I wasn't the kind of organized instructor that I am now. It's just over years of trial and error and realizing I can do better for these students if I'm more organized, but leave enough flexibility so I can grow and test and experiment with stuff too.
Right. Well, I can say from firsthand experience that I definitely resonate with your teaching style. I think it's been like 4 or 5 years since we've known you, but I resonate with that because I do feel like there's a level of organization to it, but also I feel like there's clarity. And, you know, that is just so important for, you know, beginner students, because we all know, especially those who train in other systems, that Kali is like calculus. It's not easy, you know, right away, especially if you learn it in an elusive way where you don't really get answers to basic questions. So like basic things like knowing how to chamber your free hand. You know, you were able to answer those questions and just put a clear picture in my head of, you know, the aesthetic and the mechanics. So, you know, I think there's just a benefit to continuing to improve your program. So do you still like kind of adjust things here and there, or are you pretty much set in how things, you know, should go?
Oh, I adjusted too much, probably, right? Because I had several instructors who teach for me, and when they come back and they're going to teach a class and like, what is this? And I say, oh, well, I took out something because I didn't feel like it was as important as something else that I put in there. So absolutely, I keep adjusting it all the time, and that's just part of it. But you mentioned the clarity, right? And there's kind of a balance between clarity, where the students need to know exactly what they need to train, how they need to move. But then there's also the other side where the students need to figure things out, right? And so you've got to make sure that you're doing that intentionally. You're making them cross that bridge and figure things out on purpose, rather than just because you're a lousy communicator, right? or you forgot something, you know? So yeah, so it's not to say that you're going to treat everybody like a robot and say, okay, you've got to do this. Here's, you know, move number 1, number 2, and always just hold their hand. But there's a time when you have structure that's very clear, especially for a beginner. And then there's a time when, yeah, you need them to stretch and think and learn to analyze. And so there's a balance there. And just those are tools for part of your teaching, right? And you got to figure out when to use them.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, guiding a student towards self-discovery.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
You know, you think about it this way. You asked what was training with GT like. What he would do privately is, you know, we go over philosophy, concepts, all this kind of stuff. Then he'd hammer me with coordination. And then we get into what seemed like a very organic type flow. He'd just start hitting me and I would deflect it. And as soon as I deflect it, he hits me somewhere else. And then I try to deflect that. I try to figure it out. And I get hit a bunch of times. And finally I figure it out. And the moment I do, boom, he goes to a third target. And suddenly it's a drill, or it's a flow drill back and forth. But he's kind of brought it out by testing my weaknesses and openings. And so I had to figure out what to do. And what he would do next was based on what I did. And he would guide me into using the techniques or things we had recently been working on, because it would, you know, he set it up that way. But he wouldn't say anything. He would just create a sense of urgency that I don't want to get hit anymore, you know, bloody knuckles or in the shoulder or whatever it was. And so he would build me up that way where it's all functional. And so the way he taught me at that point is because I had a foundation, I had some structure, and he was guiding me through that process. But it wasn't like, use this technique or use that technique. It was, I'm going to keep hitting you until you do something about it. And as soon as you do, I'm going to trick you and hit you somewhere else. So you better learn to flow with that. So that was his one-on-one and an amazing method of instruction. But it's only because he's such a master of the art that he can program people and bring out those skills in that way. But that's an example of what I have in mind when I think about the students have to figure it out. This may be an extreme example, but where the student has to figure it out. Because if you're fighting someone, they don't tell you which block to use or which angle to avoid or all that kind of stuff. You got to figure it out while you're being hit. And so that's kind of the way he was teaching.
I would often hear GT speak of the thought-provoking process.
Right.
And it sounds like what you're talking about is kind of one manifestation of the thought-provoking process here, where he's forcing you to think, or not even think, but to be in the moment per se, without him having to say, well, you know, do this or do that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to put it together. And he said, this is for smart people. I don't care if other people don't learn it. You got to figure it out, right? So that was his thing. And I mean, you've probably heard him say this before too, is he said, if you're not confused, you're not learning.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And that's not just to make us feel better. It's the fact that there needs to be a challenge to overcome to figure out for there to be growth. Otherwise, it's like we were talking about before, you're just memorizing stuff.
Yes.
And that's the lowest form of learning, right?
Yes. Yep. Memorization. As a high school educator, I'm just sharing with the group. We were talking about this a little earlier. Memorization is the lowest form of the learning process. You want to move a student towards synthesis, analysis, evaluation.
Right.
And so there's an element of building a strong foundation and then pressure testing, which is essential in our system, obviously.
That's right. Yeah.
And so moving into the pressure testing element of being an instructor, you know, I don't know if you could expound on that a little bit. You know, we tend to do here soft stick sparring as a base, you know, long distance sparring to soft stick sparring. And then we increase the intensity from there. I don't know if you could share what your procedure or methods are regarding that now that the fundamentals have been laid in the student.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the past, I had more of an attitude that students shouldn't start sparring until after at least about 2.5, 3 years. And a lot of that was because that's how GT taught the earlier generations. They spent a lot of time cultivating the skills, but not just open sparring without going through a process or kind of stepping stones to get there. And in my experience, when I see people come in and we have them spar before they really have a good understanding of mechanics, is they would build bad habits right away, or they just wouldn't use any of the stuff we were teaching. They would just figure out on the fly how to flip the stick around and run backwards or do something that it wasn't at all part of what we wanted them to learn. And so my attitude used to be that, oh, we need to focus on the mechanics. We need to focus on this longer before we open up and start having people spar. But what I realized is if you keep the scope much more tight as far as what the striking, sparring, force on force type element is, you can direct the students to better learn specific material instead of just open sparring. Here's your stick, good luck, try to do some Kali. So I changed my attitude while I experimented with that over the years to say, okay, well, I just taught you umbrella 1 after a few weeks of training it without much pressure, just some speed. Now let's put the headgear on and I'm going to hit you in the head and you're going to use your umbrella 1 to hit my arm, And so, okay, good. You're getting good at that. Remember that umbrella 2? And now I'm going to feed you that way. And then let's put them together. And so now I can maybe reduce it to 2 or 3 techniques that they are currently training in all other methods of coordination, flow drills, all that kind of stuff. But then pressure test them with just that material. Because, right, the key to developing the skill and refinement is the repetition. But in open sparring, you're always waiting for that perfect angle 1 to counter that 1,000 techniques to do against. And it doesn't ever come because you're looking for something rather than having the angles that you need to train being delivered at you, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I learned to kind of reduce the scope of what the kind of force on force type element or sparring element is to something that's either specific techniques or angles or something that's specific tactics, right? It could be a certain range, things like that. And I learned that you can bring your students up to more intensity and better performance earlier if you work up like that. And then after a year or 2 of doing that, they're comfortable with the gear. They've built up a little more stamina because they're learning that it's this, you can't hold your breath and this takes some work to keep up and do when the instructors keep coming by and trying to hit you in the head or your partners do. And then they get a better appreciation for the real speed, right? And the kind of the way things work a lot better earlier. So now with beginners, even if they've only trained a month or so on one module of material, yeah, we have some drills where we put gear on and we try to hit them. They have to not only apply, say, an umbrella, but they have to hit back afterwards. And we build them up. And eventually we open it up bigger and bigger until then it becomes more competitive. But that's not until, 2.5 years down the line where it's like, okay, you guys have control. You're showing me technique. Now let's spar with technique and we'll open it up like that. So that's I've changed that over the years as I didn't necessarily go through my training that way, but I learned that's working for my students.
Wow, that's awesome. Folks, if you're just tuning in again, we are honored to have our guest tonight, who is none other than Tuhon Leslie Buck, and currently out of Austin, Texas. And we've gotten a lot of comments just responding to the conversation about the foundation building that, we're kind of speaking about earlier. And I have a couple of people who, like the nomads and the elites and Guru Rolando from Florida, all who have experienced your teaching have said they appreciate just how well you've explained and demonstrated the foundational techniques, and the way that you have talked just briefly about your methods for instructing has really helped them. We have our brother from Brazil and a recent guest, Marcilio Silva, saying that you've helped him so much just recently, just in the last couple of minutes, you've spoken about instruction and how that's really helpful.
And Marcilio addressed the articles that you write, and those tips really help them a lot. And folks, if you haven't, I want to plug that Tuhon Leslie also writes beautiful articles about what he's talking about, methods for training. There were a couple of comments that we didn't get to, a couple of questions actually, regarding the connection between Kali and Silat. And for folks who asked it, I don't want you to think we're going to address everybody's questions. We were just kind of waiting for that moment. One, we know that you've studied Silat, and you say before meeting Tuhon Erwin, you studied a little bit beforehand. Now you're involved in Pikiti. How does your journey in Silat progress, number one? And two, to answer that guy, that's his screen name, to answer that guy's question, why do you think so many people find it, I think we've unpackaged this a lot, but why do so many people find Silat and Kali so similar and like to cross train?
Gotcha. Well, so first question is more about my experience in seeing the two, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I started training Kali and Silat in 1990, right? And then for a few years, I focused on the Kali, the Silat, included some Pakiti Tertia. Then I met Tuhon Erwin in 93. And that same year, I made arrangements to go to Indonesia and start training Pencak Silat Mandi Muda with Herman Sawanda there and his family. So I just jumped in when I had 3 years of training with my instructor, Stephen Fristo. And, of course, going to Indonesia, training with Herman Sawanda was an incredible experience. And so I was thoroughly hooked on that as well, just after that experience. As far as how they are similar and why so many people do it, there's a common root. I'm not sure if it's proven historically, but it's pretty obvious that many of the techniques are the same. However, the training methods are so different, and that's some of that probably varies instructor to instructor, but also the culture, right? I believe the culture in Indonesia, especially predominantly Muslim, is the belief if I train somebody to kill and they go kill somebody, that's my fault, right? So I don't want to start with weapons because I make that person even more dangerous right away. And so the mentality is let's kind of reserve some of the more deadly stuff, train the person where they're right on the edge of being able to do anything, but not quite unlock that until we've built some trust and I know that's a good person. And so, the weapons are incorporated in Silat movements, but you train the empty hands first. Everybody knows this, right? And Kali, you train the weapons first and then typically comes the empty hands, and they meet in the middle. But I found that training methods so different, again, between the two, that's what's been the biggest difference for me. However, I've shown people in Indonesia Kali, and they go, "Wow, why are they doing Silat in the Philippines?" It's like
interestingly, when we were more immersed in capoeira, we would see certain Silat moves that just look very much like traditional. Yeah, it was like, wow, this is fascinating. Now, your rank in the study of Silat that you train is Jagabaya, correct?
That's right. So there's guru levels. Guru is just a word for teacher in Indonesian. And so Herman, my instructor, created instructors as he was promoting his art. And then later he created an instructor program that was for what he called the Jagabaya. And these were the instructors he wanted to really put more detail in their training and their programs. And so there were levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe. And his sister took over after he passed away and continued to develop that. But yes, a Jagabaya 3 or Tiga is my rank in that one.
And then if I can just help, you were giving me this fascinating, because I had asked Tuhon, does that translate to like master teacher?
Oh, and gotcha.
If you could just, share with me.
So Herman, my instructor in Silat, wanted to use some more traditional terminology in promoting the art. And because, again, his teaching Silat was more about making people better people and promoting his culture at the same time, not as much about killing and breaking people's limbs and things like that. So he used the terminology from what was the elite guards in the Pajajaran Empire of West Java, Indonesia. And those elite guards went through such hardcore training with weapons, empty hands, that most of them died in the training exercises. And so those elite guards were called the Jagabaya because they survived. That the word Jagabaya means survivor. They were called Jagabaya because they survived the training. They went through the training and now they're this elite guard. So he decided, because these are the instructors he's going to focus on having the most depth, he's going to call them Jagabaya. So I don't know if we lived up to that, but it's pretty cool.
Beautiful.
Now, you mentioned earlier a little bit about culture, and I think both Silat and Kali, you know, there is an element, if you choose to immerse yourself in that, of culture. Can you just talk about a little bit of, you know, the role that culture might play in the way that you teach or the way that you train both of these systems?
I see. I guess the culture in Indonesia was so much more exotic, right? Because with the exception of my instructor, I had to learn Indonesian just to get around and talk to people and that kind of thing. So whereas in the Philippines, everybody speaks English. So I'm pretty lazy. I speak English. And the culture is very unique and different there as well. But I probably taught more culture in my programs through the Silat only because that was already there from how my instructor in Indonesia taught, right? As more about, you know, there's uniforms and just had so many stories, and it was more spiritual, right? If you wanted it to be, it wasn't part of the arts per se, but just my relationship with my instructor and my time over there. So I had a lot of experiences there as a younger man as well, looking for my beliefs and my place in the world and my understanding of the world. Traveling through Indonesia and going to these exotic places and stuff helped me kind of put that together by seeing these other cultures. So in the classes, I like to share some terminology if students ask for it. Otherwise, just enough to kind of use the more significant terms. Definitely stories about, the history of the Philippines or the history of Indonesia or the history of our art are things I like to share. I think a lot of the culture behind the arts, or maybe not even part of the art, but behind the culture of the people from whom these arts come from, is awesome. And so if you're a student of the Filipino martial arts, Indonesian martial arts, especially right now, right, you can start learning about all the awesome places and the history and cool things, the art from these different systems or lands, right? So for me, it's more like, you really want to be, especially as an instructor, you want to be someone who teaches this art. Invest in learning the culture around it, not just behind the art itself, but around it. And you'll be more of an authority and you'll enjoy it more. You'll have a more rich experience than just, I break necks and hit people with sticks and that's all I do. It's you can grow a lot spiritually and just you can learn. So.
Guru Rolando remarked he remembers a seminar in Texas where you did these thumb breaks. And they were so simple. And I'm only Guru, I think that's where I first met you, Rolando. And he's just bringing it up as a memory. But then I remember in New York a few years later, I had asked you about it again, and then you broke my thumbs all over again. Is that you? Is that Pakiti? Like, where did you get that? Where is that from? That's
Pakiti. That's Pakiti. I learned some of that from my buddy Omar Hakim, and a little bit of that from Billy McGrath, and a little bit from all my teachers, right? I mean, Erwin and then GT as well, right? It's just kind of like, it's part of the disarming. It's part of that stuff. We're disarming, countering disarms and that kind of stuff. Yet some of those techniques are also in Silat. So I had some familiarity when I see that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a little different, but that's very similar. So the Silat, if anything, even though I don't teach it very often anymore or as an ongoing class anymore, it definitely gave me a good foundation to learn some of the Dumog, some of the other material from Pakiti Tertia.
Yeah, awesome.
Morgan had another, one of our guests viewers had a question for you, Tuhon, about the Balisong. If you studied any Balisong with GT, do you still practice it and incorporate it in your training?
I every once in a while will pick it up and play with it. Yes, I trained some with GT, some with Tuhon Ramel as well. Tuhon Erwin showed me a little bit. My buddy Rudy Salazar, one of our senior instructors down in San Antonio, showed me a little bit. But yeah, I learned, and I mean, it was one of those things. We went to Batangas to pick up the real Balisong there, and those are so much better than any others, in my opinion. Just the weight and the way they move and stuff. That I just pick those up, play with them, learn all the tricks and stuff like that. It's fun. To me, I guess I consider it more as almost like culture, right? It's an awesome folding knife, right? You can put it in your pocket without stabbing yourself, just like the folding knives that, well, at least here in Texas, we carry around every day. But, you can do a lot of tricks with it. The most important thing in a self-defense scenario is you open it up, right? Most likely. But it's something that's kind of fun that we would do on the side. It was never anything real serious. But, I would play with it for a few hours. And actually, I will say one story is training with GT one year. I brought this healing oil from Indonesia to give to him from Chamande village. And people come from countries all over Southeast Asia to get this oil. And this village is famous for traditional Silat and for healing. So people come there to be healed, like broken bones, backs, all kinds of crazy stuff. And this oil there's a lot of history behind it, but this oil is something we would temper our arms and rub it on to heal faster so we could do it again and again and get more tempered. But it can mend bones, all kinds of stuff. And it's got, like dirt from someone's grave, all kinds of crazy stuff in it. But I gave some to GT. And so he gave me some of the hemog as a kind of return there. And I don't know if you're familiar with hemog. I'm sure a lot of folks who've been to the Philippines, right? It helps you seal cut and heals other things like that. So GT had given me that, and we had played with the Balisongs basically on break, right? Oh, hey, let's play with this. Well, I get home, and my wife was, we were just dating at the time, and I said, watch this, check this out. And so I was spinning the Balisong around, and it went up and down, and it stabbed into my foot and was sticking out of my foot.
Hey now.
In the Philippines, that are like a 1/4 inch thick. So I was like, oops, that wasn't part of the trick. So I kind of hopped over to the bathroom, and I was like, let's get that hemog stuff out and try it out. So my wife went and got it. Again, girlfriend at the time, but my wife went and got it. And I pulled out the Balisong and kind of wiped off the blood. And it was a good, it should have had 7 or 8 stitches. It was nice and deep. It was on the top of my foot. And she poured that on there, and it looked like somebody had a Ziploc on my skin and just closed it.
Wow.
It was crazy. I don't know if just the capillary action of the oil or what, but boom, it pulled it closed. I wrapped it up a little bit, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to wear shoes next time I train with the Balisong.
Right.
Took the bandage off. It never bled again. It was crazy.
Wow.
So, yeah. So if, I might not be great at the Balisong, but I've got the hemog to help me.
Yeah, you got the hemog, I definitely recommend wearing shoes with the Balisong. And if you're practicing iron ball, if you're practicing with the shot put,
You always practice footwork together with the iron ball or with the Balisong. Yes, and be ready to pull your feet out of the way.
Yeah.
Tuhon, I have a PTK question for you.
Okay. I'm glad, because I don't know much about anything else.
Doce Methodos versus Arvee. I see you come, there's that first generation, and we always hear that first generation of students, at that time, they studied what was known as the Doce Methodos. And then there emerged a new form of, developed by GT form of training known as the Arvee. Some of us know one way, some of us know another way. Some of us believe we know a little bit about both. You seem to be someone who came up right at that time, perhaps, and I might be mistaken, where the Arvee was really emerging and may have a clearer picture on what the Arvee is for folks who may not be as clear, and some of us can't articulate it as good as, of course, you might be able to.
Okay. I had the benefit of training with Tuhon and Erwin, who trained in the 70s and 80s. And then I went and started training with GT in the late 90s up until even now. So I've seen different versions of material and how it's put together. And ultimately, of course, it's all the same art. It's the same material. It's just presented differently. Grandtuhon is, you can imagine after teaching so many years, he's experimenting with how he teaches and gets tired of the results with one method and tries another. Not to mention people learn in different ways. And so my understanding from him was he wanted to streamline people to move faster and to integrate the material sooner, and then later layer on all the additional information from the Doce Methodos. So regardless of the terminology, it's just the way of presenting the art. And I don't think he's really teaching much different from how he did before. He's just jumbled the material up so that it's harder to divide it up. In fact, I think this happens more with students who weren't regularly training with him, but people had trouble putting stuff together. They had separate sets, but it wasn't well integrated. And, he said, he kind of withheld that a little bit. And now he's more focused on integration. but he doesn't always teach all the details behind it. So ideal world is you have both, right? The Doce Methodos gives you all the depth, all the detail. The Arvee helps you, or you as an instructor, develop people where, hey, they can move and put together at least the core components of the different subsystems in a more seamless way. I hope that makes sense.
It does.
He did. When I first started training with him in '99, privately, in between times I was there, he would fax me all these documents he had written up on the Arvee formula and the tertia method and all these things. And over the years, they kind of changed a little bit, the terminology he'd bring in. But yeah, he had, a lot of thought behind what he was doing as a way to present the material. Purely, two things. One is when somebody says, there's 10 things you need to know. When I learn all 10, I go, well, I guess we're done here. And I leave, right? So he didn't want students to quit learning, thinking they had everything. And he had that experience in the past where people felt like, oh, I got the whole art. I'm done. I can just sit back. I'm a master now. He didn't want that. So he kind of made it where people aren't sure what's there. So they are not only driven to keep learning and they stay curious, but they don't reach that point where they're like, there's nothing else to learn, or I've learned it all, right? And they keep coming back to him, which is pretty good marketing too, if you think about it. But ultimately, Arvee formula was his way of bringing together the contradas, all the thrusting-based material, and the core subsystems that are mostly weapon-to-weapon contact, break and break out, 5 attacks, umbrellas, 4 walls, that kind of stuff. And it's when I train with Tuhon Erwin, a lot of the stuff was already integrated in ways like the Arvee formula. And then other things he did teach by the numbers, but rarely did I learn the numbers from GT. Fortunately, my good friend Tuhon Shalinas has helped me so much to put together not only what I knew already or what I'd learned, but new stuff as well. And so I'm loving the combination of the two. And I think, that's my opinion. And I think it should be yours too. It's just put the two together.
That's beautiful. And it's great that you just mentioned Tuhon Phil. Joe Del Conzo, I hope I pronounced your name right. He actually just had a comment. Tuhon Leslie, if you saw the show last week, Tuhon Phil talked about trying to reconstruct and deconstruct material. Have you ever worked material with other Tuhons, to get an easier way to teach from scratch? Gotcha.
Well, luckily, yeah, I recently did watch the episode with Tuhon Phil, and he's such an awesome guy and so humble and such a wealth of knowledge too. So I appreciate his shout outs to me, and I have very much enjoyed getting the opportunity to compare notes and to learn from him as well. He's probably the one that has been at a level where we get together and there's just no, I don't want to say no reserve, but there's no competition. There's no feeling like I need to hide anything. We have mutual trust. And so it's been great to be able to exchange. Tuhon Ramel is a good friend and a teacher of mine that we've been able to do similar things where we compare notes. Of course, he's teaching me so much, but also we can talk in a way that's like, what about this? What GT showed me this? What about this? And that's awesome because to have, it doesn't have to be another Tuhon, but to have some peers and some people, to train with, some training partners that you can bounce ideas off and learn from is critical to growth, right? And so Tuhon Philip is probably the one I've been able to the most to kind of have that exchange as a Tuhon, partly because most of the other Tuhons I only see when we have a special event, right? And we're together, we're either teaching or we're out having coffee or, that kind of thing. So we don't get as much time to do that, but it's a lot of fun. And I think that's where the future of Pakiti needs to be, where there's more sharing like that at all levels.
I'm inspired to hear that. When we hear the masters, we looking up to you guys, and to hear both you and Tuhon Phil talk about this collaboration and still seeking and still pushing to learn more within the system, it's very, very inspiring. And one of the things that we talk about is how does one get a comprehensive understanding of Pakiti Tirji as you have different evolutions and different generations. And I think what you're speaking on kind of talks about it, where you have to go out, you got to seek it, you got to collaborate, share, and take with it from, what it is you're going to learn from it.
That's right.
We had a couple of other questions in the chats. We just want to make sure we address, sir.
Yeah.
Let me scroll up here a little bit.
There was one where, I think somebody asked, just how much, like, what do you do when you're particularly sharpening your own blade, like when you're doing your self-training, and, like, how do you still learn and grow as a Tuhon, essentially?
Gotcha. Well, the way I learn and grow as a Tuhon is, like we just discussed, is to get together with people like Tuhon Philip to learn from him, to learn from other instructors that aren't necessarily Tuhons, but have material or concepts to teach me that I can learn. I would say my biggest asset, though, is my training partners. I get together with those guys and they are high level and they push me to understand stuff that I may not understand, and we figure it out together. And, imagine having, you got a group of 5 or 6 people who have been doing this for a long time. You have a think tank. You have a group of people to figure stuff out together. You have many brains instead of just my one little bitty one trying to figure this stuff out. And so, man, it's critical. I'll learn something or want to review something that I learned 20 years ago and bring it out to these guys. And next thing you know, they're picking apart with the value of and the connections of the exercises or techniques or drills we're doing. And we can get really deep into that stuff and I can learn a lot. So, of course, seek other instructors that you can learn from or share with or both, and then have a training partner. And if you have to bring them up to your level, do it, because they're the biggest asset, right? Right now I can train plenty on my own, but I learn so much more when I have a training partner who's also as curious as I am about the material, and they're smart people because they've been doing it long enough to understand, hey, this makes sense. This fits. This, it's like Grandtuhon said, at a certain point, teaching the Arvee, he got instructors to a level. He said, you're going to create your own formula, and that's how you understand it, and that's all you can do. And I think that was his point of kind of realizing I can't teach the whole art to everybody. Everybody's going to have to teach to the best of their understanding and find their own way, because everybody has different talents. However, if we all get together and learn from other instructors, we can also preserve all the different subsystems and aspects of the art that may not be in one person's formula.
Right.
So yeah, that's it. And as far as training on my own, I go in and out of periods where I'll work really hard and I pick 3 or 4 things that I'm not good at and work really hard on that and take some notes about what's good, what's bad, what I need to do. Next time I train again, I do the same thing. I review that, maybe add something else on. If I'm not feeling it, I'll do something I'm good at for a little bit as a warm up. And then I'll go into the stuff that I've challenged, okay, I don't have the coordination or whatever. I'll pull out old notes or I'll pull out video every once in a while. But I just zero in on some small things and get those reps in on my own when I need to, right? When I want to make that growth, so that when I go to the next class, I am better prepared to learn more, right? I'm ready to get more out of it than just be struggling with the coordination or the things I can do alone.
Right.
That was a long answer. I hope that.
I know, it's awesome.
I answered the question.
Awesome. It's so important, and people are commenting that, Guru Rolando was talking about how, we tend to be in our own bubbles. And I was just talking to, someone from our group about how, in like 6 months, all of our platforms that we're practicing are going to be dope. They're going to be awesome. But our partner work is going to suck. It's going to be bad. We're going to be like missing and, getting each other's hands. So, I think the importance of a training partner is so crucial. And it's very inspiring to hear that even those that are higher level are still, going in the lab. So that's a great way.
MNG Francis just remarked that you would hold the Grand Global Alliance and you would host these conferences in Texas where you would kind of bring these Tuhons together, and there was all this sharing and learning. That was, like I just mentioned, the first time I met Rolando, the first time I met yourself. Those were so critical. He's actually wondering how you felt. And I don't know if it's a redundant question, but just wondering how it sharpened everybody's materials. Can we expect something like this again in the future? Absolutely. So one of the things I would like to see us do more in the future is have conferences like that in states where we have multiple instructors come out and teach and share, and the bonding of the different groups like that. So I would like to go back to facilitating events like that so it can bring us together and enjoy time together like that.
I also have talked to some of the guys about the Texas Collie Mastery Camp we did for 12 years every year, where we got all our instructors to develop a program for basically 2.5 days over a weekend. We go out to a retreat out in the countryside here in Texas and just train and have a great time together and really try to improve skills over that weekend. So I'd like to bring even that event back, and we'd always invite people from the outside as well.
You know what, now that I reread Francis's question, he was actually speaking about the mastery camp and how it helped develop instructors. And I guess that's what you were talking about right there, that those camps.
Well,
really
so there is the mastery camp that Grandtuhon did in '98 that I attended, and that's where I first met him. And we used that mastery camp name for our events in Texas for many years.
Wow.
And now Ramel has been using Mastery Camp for his very intense instructor training program. So I'm not sure which one we're talking about, but they're all good.
Yeah, no. We're talking about yours. No. He was talking about, and that's a great point. That's a great point. And I'm glad you shared that it's kind of like we're using similar verbiage, and maybe that's on purpose or maybe not. But I think he was talking about your camp in Texas where we groom, where like Mandala Arvee, for example, cut his teeth and stuff like that. And how important that was for developing and emerging instructors to kind of like focus on their craft.
That's exactly right. So yeah, we had events every couple of months we called roundups, where all our little groups around Texas would come together and train. And we let our instructors teach little blocks of that, like an hour and a half there. So the instructors get used to teaching a bigger group. They write out lesson plans. We're all kind of learning to plan out what we teach. And that was preparation for that big mastery camp event every year, where we'd spend 2-3 months weaving all the instructors' material together. So it was a seamless transition class to class over the course of the whole weekend, where all the material built on itself, right? All different weapons categories, but it was all related. And so we all grew so much as instructors, collaborating, hearing each other's ideas, and finding a way to make it all fit together, as opposed to just a sample of this guy's stuff and this guy's stuff and this guy's stuff, which is fun too. We just wanted to put everybody through the machine and let them come out after that weekend being like noticeably better at that material. And so, yeah, those events, we all learned a lot of things about training, teaching, working together. Those were very valuable, and it was a lot of hard work.
Tuhon, I know I'm not just speaking for myself, but if you build it, we will come.
All right.
Do you have any favorite subsystems to teach, or what are the most challenging subsystems to teach, do you find?
Gosh.
I know that's so open-ended.
Yeah, so I don't really have favorites so much, right? Because I like so much of the material, no matter what it is. But I guess I really enjoy teaching material where people start to understand connections, especially if they have a little bit of experience, right? And they start putting together stuff they know, this new material, and find that they're seeing a more broad picture of how things work. A lot of times when I teach, it may be stuff from the contradas or from the tertial method material, like kind of the fundamental core subsystems. But when I can start to not only improve their skill, but their understanding with that material, that gets me excited, right? Because they're better performance, but a bigger understanding so they can do more on their own. So that's maybe what I enjoy teaching the most, or at least I end up teaching the most. Hard to teach is something like maybe a spotty daga. And I only say that because it requires so much coordination that the students get frustrated and you run out of time. And if the students get frustrated, they don't realize it's your fault as the instructor, because you tried to push them to do something they weren't ready to do in too short of a period of time. And I feel bad because they lose confidence in themselves, thinking something's wrong with them because, this is my teacher, he must be doing it right, but I can't do it. And so something like a spotty daga that's so challenging, I realize that when I teach it, it has to be either high level or it has to be in very easy chunks or small chunks, or the students will be disappointed in themselves. And I hate that, right? So I struggle with that sometimes because I go too far, too fast, and regret it sometimes when it's something like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's beautiful and humbling. I think that maybe you should go in the lab and if you taught an Espadidaga class with all lefties, because we're both left-handed.
Okay,
Maybe that'll be easy. Maybe you'll get more confidence.
I mean, because our daga is, it's
'cause
no
you're like,
problem
which
for
one?
us. And we've been training right hand with the stick for so long. It's like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
We'll have a class.
Tuhon, we've asked a lot of our guests who come on the show to share a concept or technique. You know, Brother Marcelio, he actually shared something with us. Tuhon, Phil, and Jolie, they kind of wove their teaching into the conversation. I'm sure the viewers were able to, where Tuhon Phil was talking about contradas, I believe, or a number of different concepts and stuff. And so I'm wondering if you might take a minute, if you could you instruct us in something perhaps? Doesn't, no pressure? You know, doesn't it could be something we already know, or a reminder or a tip perhaps?
I guess maybe what I could explain, maybe kind of an idea of my thought process behind training might be a little bit useful, or at least something to talk about. I really think of your training method is almost more important than the techniques you do. Because the best technique in the world will never work if you haven't trained it properly, right? Of course, we need both. And luckily, we have an art that's got awesome techniques. But without a good training method, it's not going to work. And so that's why I get so interested in teaching and learning and figuring out how to make things work. And so I realized that, you know, we talk about, we build coordination from muscle memory, but it's not just muscle memory. You're training to develop habits, and those habits are going to guide you. And then you're training to develop experience or create what we call schema, right? Or you're kind of basically experience that you've created through training that will help you make judgments in the future about the correct action, right? So if you did a sparring drill and 9 times out of 10 you did X, Y, and Z, and it didn't work, you're going to realize when you get in that situation in your next sparring match, don't do that. Do something else, right? And so you want to approach your training with discipline so you create the right habits. And it's not just the muscle memory, it's the habits of how you approach things. It's the habits and the tactics you use. It's the habits of everything you do, because that's going to guide you when your conscious thought doesn't have time to catch up, right? Those are going to put you in the best situations. So that's how I approach training, is to think about how can I set people up as an instructor so that they will have the best habits for growth in the future, and to put them where they need to be to have the best success. So that's maybe something that again would be fun to kind of talk about a little bit, maybe over coffee another time. But
yeah, we can talk about that. You know, for us, I mean, we relate to that a lot. We emphasize a lot about methodology and the process. You know, so much is so much more important. And one of the things that works for me in PTK and just as a high school instructor is I focus a lot more on learning than teaching. Yeah. I try to put myself in the position of the learner and kind of learn how they learn. And that really informs my teaching. And so when you say that, it just resonates with me personally, I think Jenna personally. And it kind of reminds us too, where sometimes we want to achieve a goal in our training. And if I didn't maybe perhaps hit the marks like I wanted to, but I went through the process in a genuine way, you know, in a sincere, authentic way. I went through the process. You know, it doesn't mean I have to take away from the training as maybe a failure, but I could find the goals in those good habits that I use throughout the training to replicate next time, that maybe help me hit the mark on the next go around. I'm excited when I'm talking, so pardon me, you know.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right, because your attempt to learn, understand, observe, analyze, respond, that's the art. It's not just getting that technique down or getting that drill down. It's learning how to observe. It's learning how to figure things out. Again, if somebody's trying to stab you, you need to be able to quickly observe what's going on and figure it out. So even if you fail to learn or specifically reach some goal, that process is part of the art, right? That you're developing your mind, right? It's not just developing these tools alone. And I'm like you. I'm a student first and an instructor afterwards. I think being an instructor is the only way I can justify being so selfish and all the time I spend training myself, right? Is at least I can try to share what I've learned and help other people not be as slow as I am to learn, right? Maybe I can help them move through the material. But I pretty much want to live my life like I'll die tomorrow, and train and learn like I'll live forever, right? And just keep investing in that growth.
Wow.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Hey.
I've always said that, the best teachers are those who have, vowed to be a student. Being an instructor is really just embracing the fact that you will, you're constantly trying to, better yourself and you embrace being a student. So it's just so beautiful to hear. That's just such a healthy way to approach it. We find that, now it's time that so many people don't even know how they learn. Like, they don't even know like how they can, like what made them able to perceive and understand the information. And it's so crucial to be able to do that level of introspection, because it does determine, how motivated and how, how inspired you are to continue. Because if it's hard for you to even process the information and develop your own methodology for receiving information, then it kind of, takes away your motivation. So I think that's just beautiful.
Pakiti really empowers you to not just be fed, but to be proactive in your learning. That's why we love it. Okay. I got to address a comment that Rolando has been making over and over. The deers that we saw in Texas, me personally, and him from the Northeast, even though he's in Florida now, we never saw so many deers. It helped us with our footwork. He's been running stats, talking about the deers. It's hilarious. Want to salute our brother Guru Adam, also out there in Florida. He jumped on. My brother Demela out in New Jersey, the plant-based pugilist. Earl Fernandez has also been chiming in from New York.
Awesome.
We have one question from New York about, does your wrestling experience help you with your Dumog?
Yes, because even though the technique we learn in wrestling is very simple and it's meant to be sport, you learn the sense of balance and sensitivity of your body and someone else's when they're trying to move you, right? And try to twist you, throw you, trip you, all that kind of stuff. And so, that was also the experience where strength doesn't beat leverage, right? I wrestled at 135 and later like 142, something like that. I was a little guy, but I pinned our heavyweight at 300 pounds more than once, right? Because I just learned the technique. I wasn't a great wrestler or anything, but it's just like, this is how you do the technique. So those core skills, maybe something beyond just the wrestling techniques, but that sense of, I don't call it athleticism, but that kind of body awareness kind of stuff, that did help me. Yeah, for sure. Also, when people are struggling full force against you, it helps to kind of have some feeling of what that's like. Yeah. Right? I wouldn't do that with somebody's thumb, but maybe.
Yeah, beautiful responses, Tuhon. And MNG Francis remarked again on how you and Erwin have, are not only great instructors, Tuhon Erwin, but you've also produced great instructors. I don't know if you could just take a moment. Can you share with us what a young Mandala Arvee was like? Can you give us a little insight on what a young Mandala Arvee, what was he like training?
Oh man, Arvee is awesome because he came in and it was funny because my friend Hector, a Filipino who worked at the same company where Arvee was working, he moved away and told Arvee, you got to start training with these guys. And so they jokingly referred to him as the token Filipino. But so Hector left and Arvee came in, and Arvee was enthusiastic and had just a natural, easy learner, right? He could flow, he could move without any bad habits, and he helped us stay really organized too. I think he does things like that in New York too, right? All of us idea guys are like, let's do this and let's do that, and he'd be like, okay, let's get this organized and stuff. And so not only was he he's a great friend, he's an awesome martial artist, but he was a real important member of our group for many years, still is, of course, but keeping us organized, keeping us producing the events and fun times we had. So Arvee came out. He was, I'd come back from the Philippines after doing thousands of strikes with Grandtuhon, or punishing the Marines there with millions of strikes, and Arvee be like, yeah, let's do it. Let's jump in. Let's go do it 10,000 tonight, And so we do a few classes where it was 2 hours of just, striking, and that's it. And he was up for any of that stuff. So yeah, Arvee is awesome.
Hey, see, he was in the chats like, oh no, nah, see Arvee, it was all good, brother. We love you, man.
Right.
And you guys in the chats, these guys are hilarious too, Tuhon. When
They
you can
are.
read this, there's all these jokes going on about wrestling alligators with Dumog and murder hornets. And you know, one of the things we love about this show is that we wanted to do this so that we could involve the community. We could have an opportunity to have the people talk to you directly, and just trying to kind of treat this as a natural conversation. So when you get a chance, definitely check the comments after this, because there's a lot of beautiful things going on over there.
Definitely.
Before we move into the closing of the interview, sir, any goals, projects, upcoming things? I know we're on lockdown, but maybe you could still articles that we should be on the lookout for from you.
Sure. Well, goals, I mean, as far as Bikini Tertia is to keep learning as much as I possibly can. And a lot of that will be creating events and meeting with other instructors and training with our guys to just keep learning. I do this because I love it, right? So that's kind of the broad goal with PTK. I'm writing one, maybe two articles for this new magazine called the Immersion Review. And if you're familiar with the old Asian Journal of Martial Arts, it was a more scholarly martial arts magazine instead of just the flash and trash that most of them are. They've got, I think, other Bikini Tertia instructors have written for this magazine this first year. It comes out quarterly. So I'm working on an article about the headhunters that I went to visit in Indonesia a number of years back, and maybe another one about Silat and Kali. We'll see. So I'm working on that currently because deadlines are coming up soon for next year. This will come out next year. I continue to write articles at kaligear.com where, you know, I sell some products, but I usually put my articles up there, and occasionally at tacticalarts.com. I guess the one you're hinting at, though, is the book I'm writing. Lockdown was the final straw. I said, you know what? I need to take advantage of this time, and I'm going to start this damn thing. So
I didn't want to say it overtly. I was going to let you, you know. But yeah, folks. So, you know, Tuhon's writing a book. We want to support it.
Yes,
and it's a private journal of all his hard times in PTK.
No. It's actually, it's more about learning and teaching, right? It's about developing performance, right? And so it's the stuff that I get really into when I'm training Pikiti, and I'm hoping to support other instructors, right? You know, when I was first teaching, I learned real quick after training with Tuhon Erwin and going through these classes that out of every 10 people, one of them sticks around and they really get it and they really train hard, and they're the ones that carry the art on. So if I want a group of 10 really awesome people, I need to go through 100. And so it's kind of this way now. Is I love teaching students, but I want to be there to support instructors so that they can have that wider reach, right? They can reach more people and impact people in a positive way. And so if I can help not only the students, again, how to learn, but help the instructors how to teach, I think I can just do, you know, that can be something I do for the community and gives me an excuse to get even deeper into what I'm doing. So that's what I'm going for. I'm not going to be sharing any secrets of Bikini Tertia. So if you're hoping for, you know, pictures, techniques, no. If you are interested in training methods and you know, a lot of this is just what I have tested and done and learned from my other instructors. It's not necessarily novel, but I hope it will be helpful. I've been writing the articles for the past few years, and I tend to focus more on training articles than anything else. And so that was me just kind of testing the waters and seeing if people are interested, if this is what I want to be doing. And now I think it's the time. So it'll be a while, but I've decided to get started, and I've been working on it.
That's great.
That's great.
And Kali Gear, we cannot wait.
Yeah.
And I think the community will definitely support it.
Thank you.
Because I mean, the statistics show, you know, about developing performance in students. And Kali Gear is still a place, kaligear.com is a place where we can still get our stick bags, our sticks, our trainers. That's still, all right, that's great. I'm just trying to honestly plugging folks. As a lot of the chats are already noticing, a lot of great products are in Kali Gear. Yeah. And so, you know, even my students, they're asking for aid, and I'm sending them to the website that you have, because it's just quality stuff.
Yeah,
Thank you. We've had trouble getting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was saying it's also super practical, and it's definitely specially designed for those practicing Kali. So we appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we've had trouble keeping sticks in stock. Our suppliers are having some issues, so we've got everything else, but rattan sticks, we're struggling to get good sticks. And so you might find that we're gonna be out of stock.
Got it. You know, it's kind of like they were saying like ammo was out of stock nationwide when this went down. Little did people know rattan sticks were also out of stock because Kali people worldwide was.
My wife was saying, she goes, I read that, you know, the toilet paper, it's out of toilet paper and soap, and she goes, and bullets, why are bullets out of stock? And I said, because people with bullets take things from people who don't have bullets. And she goes, we should get some bullets. And I was like, yes. Went out and bought a brick of ammo that day.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. I love that, sir. I love that. Sir, final thoughts on the future of PTK, on your vision, on, you know, Jen and I, one of our overt projects is to establish more unity in the community. Could you leave us with any thoughts on that, sir? Any wisdom?
Well, I hope to see a future where there is more collaboration and there's more connection among the different communities, making it one larger community. I know some people will just want to do their own thing, and that's fine. It's totally understandable. But hopefully there's room for everybody to continue to enjoy the art, continue to network and learn from each other, much like we discussed already. And I hope that regardless of everything that's going on, that people still support Grandtuhon, Tuhon Ramel, and the family that's promoting the art. And you know, I personally owe Grandtuhon, I owe all my teachers for all they've shared with me and the mentorship. So I hope that we can keep moving forward in a positive way with PT Tertia. And I love what y'all are doing to bring people together, promote the community, because really when it comes down to it, that's more what it's about than just hurting people, because we could just go buy some bullets, you know, and quit training.
Just take all the toilet paper from everybody, you know? Oh, man.
So, yeah. So let's preserve the art together.
Respect to her.
Yes,
You're humble, as you know. We've been fortunate to converse with you over the years, but hopefully people who've never had an opportunity to hear from you on a direct level like this, you know, can obviously learn that you're a very humble man, clearly a master teacher, and from our perspective, a true guardian and movement and force when it comes to PT Tertia Kali.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you.
Much agreed. And we thank you so much for taking this time out. Even though we know that we're all kind of, you know, stuck indoors, it still is, you know, a labor for anyone to come and share. So we really appreciate, you know, you taking this time. And, you know, we have our gift.
So all of our guests, and I haven't been doing a good job of this because I'm just not good at this part of things.
Right.
But all of our guests, I don't know if you guys can see this, we got these wooden training blades that my students have made at the high school that I work at vocationally. And one of the things that makes it so cool is that nobody gets hurt using it. And I have a huge surplus amount because I had students making them and now they're just sitting around. And so number one, I definitely want to share some blades, training blades with you, sir. And to the viewers out there, you know, we need something from you guys too. It's a labor for Jenna and I to put together these shows, you know, and we love to do it. And so first and foremost, we would love your feedback. Your feedback on the chats is really incredible, but a lot of you guys know me, email me, message me. You know, we don't take things personally. You know, your feedback to how to make these shows better, it really does help. We don't hide behind the fact that we are instructors first and podcast hosts last. Okay? And so that being said, we do have an abundance of these trainers out there, folks. Okay. And so you, the viewer, we are not asking for donations or contributions because we want to make this platform strictly for the people. However, we wouldn't mind sharing some of these training blades with you folks. So we're going to have a little upcoming video demonstrating their value for some of you longtime viewers. But most importantly is your feedback, because having Tuhon Leslie on the show, I mean, it's an honor. He took his time. And so we want to be able to provide these guests with a lot more along the way.
So with that said, thank you so much, Tuhon, Leslie. We definitely are sending
you.
our positive energy to you and your beautiful wife, Reiko. And we hope you continue to stay safe. And we can't wait to train with you again.
Absolutely. You know, hopefully the
Thank you so much.
Tuhons event will still be scheduled again for the future. You know, the Tuhons is where in New York, Tuhon Leslie, Tuhon Ramel, and Tuhon Nonoi, Bolden Garucho come up. And it's kind of like what we're talking about, where you have these 3 Tuhons in one space sharing their interpretation. And for me, the most enjoyable experiences is after the training, when we're breaking bread and we're talking and we're hearing these stories and picking your brain about teaching methodologies. And so hopefully it will happen again this year. And any future endeavors you have, sir, on uniting the PTK landscape, I believe you'll have a lot of support from all of us. And you might be the one to do it, sir. No pressure. You might be the one to do it because, Tuhon, you could go into so many camps and you just get a lot of love from everybody. I got some immediate feedback right now that said the shows are too short.
Oh, okay.
Thank you guys. You know, I appreciate that, sir. We'll work on a longer show down the line. We're gonna have to tranquilize our daughters to do that though. Okay. Put them to sleep or something.
Yeah.
No, seriously. Thank you. Thank you guys. Appreciate you, Tuhon.
Thanks, everybody.
Please hang on for a minute afterwards so we could talk.
Yep.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Yes.
Loyalty, wisdom, respect.
Life, health, and success.
One love.
Awesome.
And we're free.